All right. Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Tim. I use he, they pronouns, and I am with Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness. Before we get started into our training today, I wanted to give a little bit of contextual information for those who have never been to a training before by our organization. So, Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness is a true coalition of about 50 different service providers and advocacy organizations in King County. And together, our collective goal is to mobilize our collective work and improve conditions for people who are experiencing homelessness and their service providers. Trainings are an important part of setting up our service providers to work with their clients to gain some sense of socioeconomic stability. Even while experiencing homelessness, public benefits are essential to getting people a little bit closer to achieving their goals. That's why we have these trainings. The training series is called Public Benefits Are Key. And food benefits, as you know, are really important to talk about. I want to mention a couple of other training and meeting opportunities for people while we're here, in case you are interested in other facets of public benefits in addition to food. We are an organization that does a number of different things for youth and families experiencing homelessness. We hold a summer project called Project Pool that helps to get backpack, school supplies, and books to a little over 1,000 King County K through 12 students experiencing homelessness every year. We have a listening session coming up on Thursday, July 11th in the morning. You can register for that listening session at the link in the chat. We want to hear from people if they have, if they are connected to families and youth experiencing homelessness and just like want us to understand what we should prioritize. This would also inform what we would talk about in a Rights of McKinney-Vento students training that's coming up in October. So we really appreciate your feedback, and we would love to hear what is relevant for families and providers lately. We know things are always changing. We also hold a monthly membership meeting. Our next one in July is going to be on the 18th at 9 a.m. on Zoom. That is the third Thursday. We're going to be talking more about the summer EBT program. We'll talk a little bit about that today, as well as share a presentation from the Telebupe hotline, which is a pretty accessible method to getting medically assisted treatment for opioid use disorder in King County. And we're going to talk about a Supreme Court verdict that will affect a lot of people experiencing homelessness all around the country. So stay tuned for that. I want to remind everybody that all of our content is available on our YouTube. I'm going to make sure to put that link in the chat. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube if you want to hear from us on other topics. And you can also opt into our newsletter. If you want to hear from us, we send a newsletter about once a week sharing information about trainings and meetings and things that I'm talking about right now. And also short-term community announcements. Finally, we know that your feedback is really important to being able to have trainings that are relevant to our providers and community members who are serving people with housing barriers and barriers to basic needs. So we have a post-training survey that we would love for you to take at any point. You could take it today, you could take it tomorrow, you could take it right now if you really want to, but I don't think you've gotten a lot of what this training is yet. Please take that survey to let us know if this is relevant, if we should talk about other things, if you have any general feedback. So that's all of our general announcements out of the way. I want to introduce our presenters today. We have had the benefit of working with Patty Bowen, I'm so sorry, and April Mazer from the Benefits Legal Assistance Program at Solid Ground. We've worked with them a couple of times before. They are a wealth of information and very knowledgeable. They have a lot of experience working with clients with a variety of barriers accessing public benefits. And they are going to be talking about food benefits for people in King County. I'm going to pass it over to our presenters. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Tim. My name is Patricia or Patty Bowen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the program manager for benefit legal assistance, and I'll be starting us off and then passing it over to April. As we go through this presentation, we will take breaks for questions. So please hold off verbally doing any questions until then. You can put them in the chat as we go, and Tim will keep track of them and we will address them as we go. If you're confused by anything, if I'm going too fast, also put that in the chat as well. And we will get started. So before we jump straight into food benefits, we do want to address the fact that all benefits are rooted in a system of systemic racism, systemic classism. Honestly, it is to the point where we could give an entire presentation just on that. It is not predominantly why we're here today, so I will not go in depth, but I do encourage you, if this is something you're interested in, want to learn more about. There are links that we have shared, and they will be available on the PowerPoint that is shared out with you guys after. Because you've attended today's presentation, we also have kind of a supplementary service. It's called our Ask a Lawyer program. What that means is if you don't have a question right here, right now, or you have a very specific question that you don't feel comfortable asking right here, you can email us and ask that specific question. And one of our staff will personally respond to you, address your question, and or let you know that that is something that is more complicated than a one-off, and that we would be happy to help that person instead and work through the application process with you, our referral process. So you just email us at benefitslegalhelp.solidground and just put ask a lawyer in the subject line. That way we know that it's a question and not a referral, and we will get back to you as soon as possible, usually within like 2 to 3 business days. So kind of broad overview of the topics we're going to cover. We're going to go over basic food, and we're going to go over food benefits for immigrants. We're going to go over the application process as well as the temporary Sunbucks program. We're going to go over able-bodied workers without disabilities, and there are some new changes there. Some tips for how to avoid benefit pitfalls. So hopefully you or your clients don't end up in a position where you need to reach out to BLA and get them help. And then we'll go over the hearing and appeals process for how to go through it if you do fall into some of those pitfalls. So before we jump in too deep, we do want to address the replacement of stolen EBT benefits. So this has been kind of a growing problem that our state, as well as kind of our country, has acknowledged, is that there are some large systems at work that are stealing food benefits. This is not a stolen EBT card itself, that is separate. This is a skimming issue. So if you use your EBT card, for example, at a grocery store, at 7-Eleven, and it has a skimmer on the card reader, then it has been stolen, even though you physically still possess that card. There was a retroactive replacement program that has been in effect. However, that did end, which means right now the option available to you is to report any suspected skimming within 30 days of discovering it. So what that means is, say you get your food benefits on your EBT card on the 1st of the month, you go to the grocery store on the 6th, you have 30 days from the 6th, because that is when you are assumed to have had knowledge of your benefits and should notice that they are being skimmed. The reimbursement claim form is listed here on our PowerPoint. It is worth noting that unfortunately this reimbursement program is temporary. It's only in law and in effect until the end of September. So If you have any clients that you work with that are suspicious of this, utilize it, please, but also know that as of right now, this resource is temporary. Obviously, if we have any updates about supplementary programs going forward, we'll share those out, but as of right now. So back to what is this EBT card that I'm talking about? What are these programs? The most commonly used one is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. It's also referred to very commonly as food stamps. It is a Washington basic food program that provides food supplements for low-income families. What it is it's cash put onto an EBT card that is given to the low-income families that is eligible for usage on food. It's based on a few things, including citizenship status, family size, and monthly income. It is also important to know that there may be work requirements for some recipients. It is individually based. So say you're not eligible for SNAP or your client is ineligible, there is another program in place. It's called the State Funded Food Assistance Program, or FAP. And it is for people who do not meet the immigration status requirement of SNAP. People who are undocumented are not eligible for either SNAP or the state-funded food assistance. This FAP program is the same amount of money as SNAP, so you don't get less just because you don't meet that immigration status. It's also important to know that in a family, there may very well be mixed immigration and citizenship statuses within a household. You can apply for SNAP and FAP or one or the other, and not everyone in that household has to be eligible for you to be approved. You would just only get approval for the household members who are eligible. And for the members that are not eligible or not comfortable, you are not required to give your immigration status if you are not trying to seek those benefits. Also, the immigration status of anyone who applies is not considered, is not disclosed, is not shared with ICE or any other immigration program. It is solely used for consideration for benefits, and that is it. So this is kind of a flow chart to hopefully understand who applies and would be found eligible for SNAP. And those are the US citizens, US nationals, Canadian-born Indians, and yes, automatically you meet that prong of the application process. Obviously, you still have to look at monthly income and the rest of the thresholds, but if you are not one of those citizenship statuses, then you go to the no, over to the right. If you are a qualified alien, if you're a victim of human trafficking, then you qualify. You go down, you see if you are a refugee, an asylee, deportation, withholding, all of that. Anyway, I'm not going to read the whole thing. We'll be here a while, but again, we'll share this out. And it's helpful kind of to keep on hand. So if you're working with a client and you're not sure which program to have them apply for, it hopefully answers some of those questions. Unfortunately, like I said, if you are undocumented, you are not eligible for either of those programs, either SNAP or FAP. But other than that, you should apply and be eligible for one of them as long as you meet the other criteria. So we're going to briefly touch on what is public charge, just because it is an immigration rule in place that affects many benefits and immigrants in the United States. That being said, public charge does not affect your ability to apply for and receive food benefits. So it may be considered for cash assistance and long-term medical, but in terms of applying for SNAP or FAP, public charge does not apply. If you have questions about this, quite honestly, it is a legal question. So feel free to reach out to ourselves or NJP to ask that. It's not something that, unfortunately, is super straightforward, but it's worth addressing. There is also a food assistance program specifically targeted towards homeless youth. So if a minor is homeless and temporarily living at the residence of a child who is not their parent or guardian and does not provide for them financially, they're not considered to be under parental control, and they're considered their own assistance unit. What that means is they can apply for benefits for themselves instead of having to have a parent or guardian apply on their behalf or with them. And they're not required to have a residence or an income to be able to apply. So they also don't have to qualify for that work requirement that may be in place for basic SNAP. The child should not be considered financially independent unless the child receives significant and substantial financial support. So this is not, you know, my friend's mom gives me $20 every once in a while so I can buy food. That is not substantial financial dependence or support. So they'd still be considered their own independent assistance unit. However, if the minor regularly buys and prepares food with others, they might be considered the same assistance unit. So for example, if the minor is couch surfing, staying with a friend and eats every single meal, prepares every single meal with that friend and that friend's family, they would be considered part of that assistance unit most likely, and they would not be able to apply by themselves. So there's a little bit of nuance there, but especially if that minor is unhoused, is not able to utilize, you know, friends, family to assist them with food, this is a great program to get them some money for sustenance. There is also something called transitional food assistance. This is a program for families that are coming off of TANF due to the increase in income. So it's not eligible if they're coming off of TANF because they were in sanctions. So if you're being kicked off because you fell into one of those pitfalls and you're being kicked off the program, you can't utilize this. But if you got a raise at work and you're right over that threshold and you're in this very uncomfortable position where, yeah, it's great that you're working more, but now you have this burden of having to add groceries on because you're not eligible for SNAP. This is a temporary program that helps bridge that gap. So you have to have previously been receiving basic food and then be coming off of SNAP, and you get an additional 5 months of basic food to help bridge that gap between the shift of income and the shift of that TANF. So, and the other great thing is the benefit will stay the same. So the amount of money that you are receiving prior to this change and coming off of TANF is the same amount of money you would get for these 5 months. They're not going to reduce it based on your new higher income, because quite honestly, that would defeat the point because you would then be ineligible due to higher income. So if you know anyone that is in that position, it's a great program to provide them with some temporary relief. The next program we're going to touch on, but not really go into depth on, is WIC. This is the Women, Infant, and Children program. It's for pregnant and postpartum persons and their child or children up to age 5. So unlike an EBT where cash is put onto a card, you are actually mailed WIC checks that specifically say what you can purchase. It is predominantly used for fruits, vegetables, rice, beans, things like that, considered staples. While the person is pregnant, then when the person has the child, they continue to get that for themselves for a while, and they start getting food for the infant. So most likely that is formula. If you are breastfeeding, it is more sustenance for the nursing person. But it is very specific on those checks what it is for, and it has to be used at a WIC certified establishment. Income must be at or below 185% of the federal poverty limit. So you can look it up. We don't have a chart for that just because this is the only program which has that income threshold. But for example, for a family of 4, that amount is $4,625. So sunbucks, you heard me mention it very briefly at the beginning, but this is the new and temporary program for the summer of 2024. So this is a grocery benefit program for families that have eligible children who would otherwise be in school. So they're the ones who more likely than not are receiving lower reduced or free lunches at school. And now because it's summer, they don't have that option available to them. This is a one-time payment, goes onto that same EBT card, that is for $120 per eligible child. I apologize, it doesn't go onto an EBT card. It goes onto a separate card that is literally identical, except that it is temporary. They will expire, those $120, within 122 days of when you receive it, or of if you don't use it. So if you get it July 15th and you forget about it and you realize it next year, that money's gone. But if you are using it, then you're not losing it, which is great. US citizenship is not needed to apply for and qualify for this, which is great. Additionally, again, immigration status of the child and their families is not shared, is not considered. Where it gets kind of foggy is who is automatically signed up for this, who is not, who is eligible, how do I know? I wish I could give you a beautiful, succinct answer. I was not put in charge of this program, so here we are. School-age children will automatically be enrolled if they are already receiving SNAP, TANF, or FDPIR, but they might be enrolled if they attend and qualify for NSLP, SBP through their school. So that's a lot. And a lot of people receiving benefits don't always know what they currently have, what they've been signed up for in the past, what their child is signed up for. If you are not sure, they have a hotline that is supposed to go live, and I'm told hopefully next week. But what I recommend kind of above that is their text forum. So you can sign up and get text updates to let you know when everything goes live, how to apply, and if it's the phone number that you have signed up for your other benefits with, they should be able to let you know whether you are automatically enrolled or whether you have to do the application yourself. So as of right now, there's not a sign up available on their website. There is, however, that text set up. So if you sign up for this text, it'll let you know when the application is open. We are hoping that will be the first week of July. We'll keep all our fingers crossed and we'll update you. I'm gonna pause here because I know I just gave a lot of information. We're gonna have questions, and then once we've answered some of those, I'm gonna hand it over to my colleague, April. If you think of questions later about this section, throw them in the chat as well. But for now, if anyone has questions about the programs we've gone over so far.
Yeah, who's got questions for Patty? That was a good, just like a wealth of information, giving a good overview of different types of food benefits accessible to people of different citizenship statuses in Washington. One thing I want to mention, and you talked about this beautifully, Patty. I've been talking about Sunbucks in a lot of different spaces lately because we've been trying to get that information out to different groups of people. It is awesome that this is a program, unlike all other food benefits programs in Washington, that are accessible to undocumented families. That is true for no other program. So that's a really big deal. It is unfortunate that it is a little tricky to find out if you are eligible, or well, to find out if you are automatically enrolled, because many people are eligible. So many people, like 500,000 estimated households in Washington. And it's just if you are low income, essentially, like that's I think it's like 120% of the federal poverty line. It's a lot of people. There will be more information to find out how you can get it in a few weeks, by early to mid-July. So we appreciate you hanging in there. Any questions about Sunbucks or summer EBT or any other topics that we have shared so far?
Just to give people a chance to throw things in the chat if needed, I also think it's worth mentioning, not specifically Sun Bucks, but it's kind of part of a same overhead program. It's called Sun Meals, and those are those summer meals that are given out for children under 18 or currently enrolled in high school. And you can find a map that shows eligible or locations where you can get those meals throughout the summer. It is on the same website as this link that's in our PowerPoint. So if you go there and you click on Sun Meals instead, you can look up a list of locations that you can go to get those meals for children for the summer. And it looks like we might not have questions. So I will hand it over to April. And again, if you think of something later, just throw it in the chat. And April, I'm going to click as I assume you would like me to go. If I am on the wrong slide, please let me know.
Okay. Are you seeing the sun? Is it still on the Sunbuck slide? Okay. Okay. Here we go. Hi, April Mazer. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the social worker for the Benefits Legal Assistance Program, just for a short introduction there. So when a client applies for SNAP benefits, the income limit will dictate how much the person is going to receive in benefits. So the chart that's on the screen now is the maximum benefit amounts per assistance unit. So the closer that somebody gets to the income limit, the smaller their, or the, like smaller amount that they're going to receive, with the limits here being kind of the caps on things. And then DSHS will calculate income based off of household size, obviously whether that, whether the income is earned or unearned income, household expenses, childcare and child support, and medical costs. I think we can move to the next slide. So to give you an idea of what the income limits look like for SNAP benefits and the state-funded food assistance program, they have the same income limits. It is 200% of the federal poverty line. So you can see the maximum kind of caps there. And I think we can move to the next slide because I think it kind of goes into deductions. So the way that DSHS calculates your income is they take your income and then you're going to get certain deductions based off of whether if your income is earned, you will get a 20% earned income deduction. So they're only going to count 80% of what your gross income is, instead of accounting for 100% of it. If you are working with a client that is receiving like Social Security benefits, or what they would consider to be unearned income, that is counted dollar for dollar. So the whole amount of that gross income would be counted as the income. There's no deduction there. And then if somebody is self-employed, they would get a 50% deduction. So DSHS is only looking at half of what they are earning. You also get deductions for, again, child support that you are paying out, housing and utility costs. So that is what DSHS is going to refer to as your shelter deduction, out-of-pocket childcare expenses. And if you have a family member that is disabled or over the age of 65, the medical expenses for prescription costs, co-pays, insurance premiums is another deduction. So I think we can move. So if you're working with a client that is getting, maybe they're right at that edge of being able to receive benefits. So they're only receiving like maybe $23 a month in food benefits. That's when you really want to start looking at their eligible deductions. And making sure that DSHS is accounting for those. So making sure that they have, the right rent amount for that the person is paying, the right, again, if you're working with somebody that is elderly or disabled, making sure that their medical costs are being counted in. So, prescription costs, any, over-the-counter medication. Also, if a doctor is prescribing over-the-counter medication for maybe like, like aspirin for a heart, issue or something like that, that over-the-counter medication can also be counted. You would just want to provide a, letter from the doctor saying why it is necessary, and then also receipts kind of showing the expense that you're having for that. So, just providing as many receipts and, information you can to DSHS to show, the cost of, medical treatment for the client that you're working with. Yeah.
And just to jump in really quick, there is a list of eligible and ineligible products on the DSHS website as well. So if you are not sure for your client if something should count as a deduction, you can check. For example, vitamins would not normally count, but if your doctor prescribes prenatal vitamins, for example, it would count. So all of those distinctions are on the DSHS website.
Thanks, Patty. So then going through the application process. So, how do you or your client apply for benefits? I, as much as possible, would recommend using the Washington Connection website. I find in working with clients, it is kind of the fastest way to get the application from the client to DSHS for processing. You would go to the Washington Connection website. If the client is doing it themselves, I recommend that they set up an account for themselves, because then they can log back in. They would be able to use that portal for providing documentation to DSHS. If you are a case manager and you are helping somebody apply, you can actually access the application online without creating an account. When you hit the apply button, there'll be a little box that pops up. You can hit the next button on that and it'll bring you into the application. You just want to make sure that at the end of the application, you're making a note of the confirmation number that it is giving you, and then printing a copy of the application for either yourself or your client or both. Just to make sure that that information is being, like if something happens, because technology glitches. So if something happens with the website, they don't have to go back from, ground zero and start the application all from one. They can kind of hand that application over to the DSHS worker during the interview, or provide that information to the DSHS worker during the interview in order to bring up information about their application. Some other ways that you are able to apply: you can go into any local community service office and do the application there. You can also apply over the phone through their customer service line. So you'll need, in order to apply, you need to provide your income information, any assets that the client might have in terms of, property, trusts, information like that, and then what your household's expenses are. So this is just kind of an idea of what the paper application looks like. This is also kind of what the application looks like if you do it online and print the application for a client. It'll be kind of this sort of setup, but it'll plug all of the client's information into the application as you're going through it. So it prints kind of as the application form. And then just some kind of tips for the application process that we find really helps is, making sure that you have that proof of income at the jump. If you are able to help a client access, their pay stubs through a pay portal, get letters from their employer. If they are self-employed, you can use bank statements or IRS documentation, and just kind of having all of that information ready to provide to DSHS when it's asked, or even when you're applying, if you're putting in the paper application for a client, just adding that information at the back of the application so it's already there for DSHS to review can really help going into the interview process. Because the way that food stamp applications work is you provide the application, either through the website, the phone, or the community service offices, or even a paper application if you're faxing it or mailing it in. And then the second part of it is what they call the financial interview. And that's really just DSHS looking at the application with the client and just kind of verifying the information that's been put on there. At that time, they are also kind of confirming on the back end systems that they have, what the client's assets are, and just kind of making sure that the client is financially eligible, and making sure that the information that's being provided on the application is correct. And those are kind of the two big steps. Once you get through the application and the financial interview, at the end of the financial interview, the client should find out whether or not they're eligible, or whether or not DSHS needs additional information to determine that eligibility. So some things that they might need in order to determine eligibility. So if a client has recently, been laid off from a job or has stopped working for any reason, they may be asking you for what they call a stop work form, which is a form that they would send, you would send to an employer. The employer then fills it out on behalf of the client that you're helping, or the employee that worked for them. And it's really just stating, like when they stopped working, when they will receive their last pay, and how much they would have received on that last paycheck, so that DSHS is able to determine whether or not the person would be financially eligible for, so if you're applying in May and the person stopped working towards the end of May, and they got really onto that application right after, like the loss of job, they may or may not be eligible for May benefits, but going into June, they would be eligible for benefits. So it's just kind of determining when exactly those benefits should start hitting the client's account for them. And then I always recommend, if you're working with a client, especially a client that might have like high need barriers, where they just need like a little extra assistance with DSHS, because it is a bureaucratic system and it can be really difficult to navigate for some clients. Be there with your client. Like, I will often sit on hold for DSHS and then conference call clients into the financial interviews, and just let DSHS ask their questions. And then that way, if they are asking for things like a stop work form, you already kind of know what it is that DSHS needs, and you don't necessarily have to rely on that client reporting in order to know what DSHS needs. So it can be really helpful to be in those meetings with clients, whether that's food stamps or another DSHS program that you might be helping them apply for. Any questions on applications or tips for the applications? I do lots of them, so I'm happy to be a brain to pick.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat at the moment. Oh, we got a question from Connie. Go for it, Connie.
Hi, good morning. I have questions is a lot of senior went to travel during summer. So they will ask us like, do we have to report it to the DSHS if they have a SNAP benefit? Do they have to report it to them that they say, hey, I'm gone for like 3 months or I'm gone for like a couple of weeks to report them they are not in their our stay?
Do you want to field that one, Patty? Because I think it's more of a legal question.
So they don't need to let them know if they're taking a temporary like vacation, living somewhere else for a month, etc. If you are going to spend more than half of the year somewhere else, you would be considered a resident of that other place. So yes, you do need to update them. But for purposes of SNAP benefits or really any public assistance programs, if it's less than that and you are still a resident here and this is your address, you don't need to let them know. The only caveat to that would be if you're going to be somewhere else for so long and you're worried about getting mail or something to that effect about changes in benefits, you might want to update them with a temporary address. But otherwise, you should be able to use that EBT card anywhere you're traveling that accepts EBT. And you don't need to let them know that, you know, this week I'll be in Florida visiting family or something to that effect. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you. And the other questions is for the self-employed income. So we have families like they have several several self-employed job and like different driving delivery things. They always ask us like how many months and they need to provide for the income because there's so many check and then when they because they will have some deduction after the test you know that in the test return so the income will be so high so how can we like, tell them can we just tell them oh they just only have 50% of the self-employed income?
So we see that a lot. And it is kind of complicated because there is such a fluctuation. So if I refer to those as like gig work. So if you are doing those, you know, Uber Eats, those kind of changing incomes, really to do the application, you need to supply 30 days of your most recent income, but also as you're going through and receiving benefits, if your income is changing, you need to be updating them every single month as well, which is unfortunate. But based on the amount of income you are receiving impacts how much benefits you're receiving. So by the 10th day of the next month, you need to be telling them what your previous month's income is to make sure that you're not accidentally receiving too much and they might come after you for an overpayment, or you're not receiving enough and you're not really utilizing the full amount of the benefits that you should be receiving. So it's not a great answer, but the answer is if they're fluctuating a lot, they need to be reporting it a lot as well.
Okay, I have two more questions, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm maybe I missed it, but for the EBT scammer, so we recently we have like quite a group of one of the family lost their benefit. Then we advise them to go to the local DSHS office and they just give them the new card. And I didn't know that they there is the reimbursement claim form. So I will ask them to they fill this out, but if they don't, can we fill it out and have them to bring it back to the DSHS? And they keep calling us about like when they would get the benefit back. So because when I see that that looks like we don't know, and then DSHS will just give them the phone number to call, but the phone is no one answer. So people getting so frustrated. So is there any like solutions, like any like things that I can tell the families about the stolen EBT benefit?
To my knowledge, there's not a set timeline of when to expect that back while it's in effect. But I totally understand, unfortunately, the frustration. There is quite a wait list or a call log wait time when you call. If they're going in and getting new EBT cards, though, their benefits should start back again promptly. It's just that receiving the prior benefits that were stolen that I don't really have a timeline for, unfortunately. I don't think they've published one.
Yeah, I've helped a couple of people with this process, and what DSHS has told me is once they receive the form, they send it to like a separate sort of office in Tacoma, I believe. And that office is part, I believe it's part of the Office of Fraud and Accountability. And they kind of determine whether or not the benefits have actually been stolen. So the way that they determine that is, you know, are other people reporting issues from, you know, like the same Safeway? Or are there benefits being used out of state and in state that don't really make sense? Like people aren't traveling, you know, to New York and then Seattle within a few hours of each other. So they kind of look at the benefits to make that determination. And then after that, it would then be refunded back to the client if it's decided that the determination is that the benefits were indeed stolen. The clients that I have helped with this, it takes, I think the shortest amount of time I saw it take was about 4 weeks. But it can take longer than that. It really is just kind of depending on, you know, how many of those forms are ending up in this office. DSHS 2, when a client is going into the community service office to report that their benefits have been stolen and reissuing that EBT card, they should be filling out that form with the client at that time. And then I would say if you have a client that's reporting that they did not do that when they were in there, that's when I would say fill out the form and help the client submit it. Because we only have 30 days from the date of the stolen benefits to make that claim. So it is a very like time sensitive, because even like 31 days after that, DSHS will deny it. So, and that's just kind of how the federal legislation was written for this.
Thank you. Thank you. One more questions about sunbeds. So before sunbeds, there's like PEBT, right? And then family doesn't know that they need to keep the card after they use all the benefit. So this time, do they have to keep the card after they use for the summer? Or they will, I don't know, next year they still have this program. What if they still have this program? Will they send them the new card?
Yeah, so this program is only green lighted for 1 year. There might be a similar program next year. We will probably find that out in about 10 months. But it very well will have a different name, potentially different rules, and it will have, to my knowledge, a different equivalent of an EBT card. So there is no reason that you need to keep the card after the end of the summer and the utilization of those $120 per child. In the future, if they have a new program next summer, a new card would be given out then.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you all to like answer all my questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks for those questions. Really great, a good range of topics we got to cover. I have a question from Keith in the chat. I'm going to read it aloud. When it comes to getting additional benefits based on having a parent over 60 years old, does that parent need to be a U.S. citizen?
So it's kind of referring back to that little flow chart. They are still independent of age. You are still bound by the citizenship or immigration status requirements of the program. But for example, if your client is getting SNAP, they have a relative person living with them over 60 and they want to add them, you would just be looking at that same immigration status question. So would they be eligible for SNAP? Would they be eligible for FAP, or ineligible because they are, for example, alien? So maybe. Unfortunately, I can't give you a succinct answer. If you have a very detailed question, like I said, you can use that ask a lawyer. So if you want to give me more information that you probably don't want to share on a public forum, you are welcome to email, and I can give you a precise answer based on specifics.
Okay, great. I just put the phone number and the email in the chat for folks to pass over some more personal questions to our team at Solid Ground. Last call for questions at this segment. We will certainly, I think we have another space to ask questions, but any other questions related to eligibility or how to apply for food benefits? Okay, well, I think now, for now, let's keep moving. If you have questions at any time, please put them in the chat and I will make sure to bookmark them.
Thank you, Tim. So the next thing we're going to talk about, which actually kind of relates back to the last question about seniors as well, is our able-bodied adults without dependents. So this might be something that that client falls into. This is a program ages 18 through 54, and just to flag this, this actually changes. So right now it is a program for 18 to 52, but that is going to change to 54 in October of 2024. So we have it updated with a little asterisk. And this is for people who are not getting food benefits for any children under age 18. They are able to work and are not physically or mentally disabled, injured, or have health issues that would prevent them from working. They can receive food assistance for 3 months and then must meet work requirements. Work requirements were suspended during COVID, but they have now restarted as of almost a year ago. So what this means is usually you'll only get 3 full months of food stamps in a 36-month period if you're not meeting those work requirements. If you were kicked off of the food stamps program before January of 2021, it has now started a new 36-month cycle. So we encourage you to reapply to get your 3 months. And also, if you are not meeting the work requirements and you're removed, you still get 3 months of benefits before losing them. If you are exempt or meeting work requirements, you will keep getting food stamps as you have been. What are the work requirements? The individual applying has to be working at least 20 hours a week or averaging 80 hours a month. Volunteering at a community through workfare. The number of volunteer hours is determined based on the benefit amount. Participate in state-approved employment or training programs. There is a good cause exemption. So if you are not able to meet the work or volunteer hours, call DSHS and let them know why. If it's a one-off, if you get COVID, if you get injured, if extenuating circumstances, let them know. And if it is a good reason and it is not a very reoccurring reason, then there is a good cause exception, so you are not in violation. There are other exceptions as well, or exemptions, that we will, I believe, go into. So the one thing to remember, and it's kind of unfortunate, but most people here are probably working in King County, maybe Snohomish County. King and Snohomish County are currently the only 2 counties that have a work requirement for this program. Everywhere else is exempt. There are also kind of caveats within that, which is for the Muckleshoot and Tulalip reservations, they are also exempt. So even though they fall within those counties, they have tribal requirements instead. So they are exempt as well. So unless you're working in King County or Snohomish, You can ignore this slide. If you're working in those two counties, it is worth remembering, or rather, if your clients are residing in those counties, it's worth remembering. So what to do if you can't meet that work requirement? Like I said, there's that good cause exemption. Just call, let them know. You know, everybody has a sick day every once in a while. Everybody has a cut in hours once in a while. Holidays fall on random days that might cause you to not quite meet your hours. Things happen. Thankfully, it does acknowledge that. The information they give is, yeah, for example, if you can't find childcare, as long as this, again, not a recurring issue, if you injure yourself, if you become sick, and that can be yourself or a family member, especially if they're dependent, or if your transportation breaks. So if you have car trouble, if you're on a bus and that bus has an accident, which unfortunately happened in Seattle about a week ago. Things like that, we acknowledge life happens. You shouldn't be losing benefits because of that. There are multiple exemptions, so call, let them know. They will add it to your record, and as long as it is not a recurring issue, you are exempt. Another piece of advice is keep record of when you call DSHS. Sometimes things fall through the cracks, something's not entered into your file, and if you're calling back afterwards and trying to show, no, I called, I was told I was exempt, knowing the day and time that you called is so important because they can actually verify it. If you don't remember and you're just saying, I don't know, I think I called maybe the first week, it is so much harder to actually prove that you are in compliance and you called to ask for that good cause exemption. So keep track, even if it's like, you know, jotting it down in a notebook so you remember, or taking a screenshot of your call log, just whatever works for yourself or the client. So what are these exemptions? You are not physically or mentally able to work, you are exempt. If you care for somebody with a disability or an incapacitated adult, exempt. If you are taking part in a drug or alcohol rehabilitation program, you are temporarily exempt. If you get a disability-based benefit such as SSI, SSDI, ABD, workers' comp, or if you are pregnant, you are exempt. If you get unemployment benefits currently, you're exempt because that kind of fills the category of being employed. If you have applied for but have not yet received those unemployment benefits, you're a student enrolled at least half time. So you just look at the credit requirement, and as long as you hit half, you are exempt. If you cannot work or find work because you are currently unhoused, that is also an exemption. And if you are already meeting the work requirement of an employment program through TANF, that also counts, even if that requirement is less than those 20 hours of employment through this program. 2 more exemptions. As of, like I said, almost exactly a year ago today, only 2 counties have this work requirement. So make note, you don't need to be bringing this up if you are, for example, on the east side of the state. Just delete this from your mind. If you live outside of these counties, you don't need to think about it. You don't need to worry about exemptions. You don't need to worry about those good costs because all of those are dependent on that work requirement. A few tips. If you think you should be exempt because you're unable to work, ask your doctor. Have them write a statement that very clearly outlines what are your capabilities, what are your limitations, how often, how frequently, how this impacts your ability to work. Having that written statement from a doctor can be very important and might be the determining factor. If you are currently unhoused, call them and let them know immediately or as soon as possible. And that's something that we as, providers or assistants can do on their behalf. We can be kind of that resource for them to call with them and let them know. Tell DSHS that you're unhoused and therefore that you are unable to work and are asking for that exemption. Also, starting last year in September, those who are unhoused, veterans, and individuals aging out of foster care will be able to apply for an exemption as well. And then the tip, the really big tip, which I feel like we've kind of alluded to, is don't wait for DSHS to screen you and see if you're exempt. Bring it up. If you think your client has an exemption, bring it up, ask, or email us and ask. But either way, don't wait, because in the interim, they might be not receiving benefits they should have because of that exemption. We'll do a short pause for questions, and then we have one more section, and then we'll do a big overview question time then as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Any questions about quote unquote, able-bodied adults without dependents and work requirements? Yeah, this has not always been there. There have not always been work requirements when it comes to food stamps. I believe that I received food stamps in my early 20s before work requirements were applied. So policies change. The state tries to save money. And unfortunately, it is sometimes on the back of people with few resources. So if you have applied, if you know someone who has applied in the past, like a long time ago, like more than 10 years ago, this may be new information to share with them. Not seeing any questions in the chat.
One other thing I'll just throw in as well is, because this work exception is a requirement, is new and is location dependent, a lot of times you will have clients who fall in and out of that requirement as they are moving. So many people are moving almost every year when those leases renew, and you might fall right inside or outside of county line depending on where you live. So it is worth getting that information from your client. And also, if they fell within King County or Snohomish and they lost the benefits because of non-compliance, if they move outside of those counties, they can get the benefits again, because now they fall under those other rules, which do not have those work requirements. So it's always worth checking. Even if your client tells you, I lost the benefit, follow up, see where they live now. Maybe they're eligible again.
Great tip. Absolutely. Especially people, yeah, I mean, I can think of people moving from South King County in and out of Pierce County, as rents are raised and people, and people experiencing homelessness are uniquely mobile, I'm sure we know. So people may be staying more, may consider their residential address, or may receive mail in Tacoma, and then they may move further north a little bit where they would be then held to those work requirements. So that's really good information to share. I don't see any questions in the chat, and I don't see any hands raised. So I'm going to pass it back to our presenters for their next section.
Yeah, so we will just kind of end in kind of covering, setting your clients up for success. Like, how do you avoid pitfalls with people's benefits? So, we touched on this a little bit, but making sure that you're reporting changes to DSHS in time. So any, increase or decrease in household income or size, or just any information that may impact their their rent is going up or something like that, making sure you're reporting that by the 10th of the month following the change. So if your client's rent went up in the beginning of June, making sure that that's reported to DSHS by the middle, or by the 10th of July, to make sure that those deductions are being counted correctly, or the income is being counted correctly. If you have questions on what needs to be reported to a client, you can or reported to DSHS, you can reach out to them. If you or your you or your client are uncomfortable, we are happy. That would be a great opportunity for the Ask a Lawyer, just to see like, hey, does this need to be reported? And then, making sure you're complying with those work benefit or those work requirements, and telling DSHS if you or the client are unable to comply with those requirements. And I think, one of the things that I think benefits a lot of clients, especially clients that might be working with a case manager, because I think, a lot of times those are clients that might be higher needs. Making sure that DSHS is setting them up with what they call an EAP, or an equal access plan. So if you're working with a client that might have, developmental disabilities, or physical disabilities, or, like they're neurodivergent, and, maybe sensory input is a lot for them, and they need a quiet space in order to be able to have conversations with DSHS, making sure that the DSHS is aware of those things and is going to set up a plan in place so that the client is able to communicate with them in a way that the client needs them to communicate with them. So, allowing for extra time to submit forms to them. Again, having a quiet space in order to be able to talk to DSHS, getting phone call reminders of appointments. These are all things that you can have in an equal access plan, and DSHS is required to follow those plans. So I highly, highly recommend, especially if you are a case manager and you're helping clients apply for DSHS benefits, specifically asking DSHS about these equal access plans, because while DSHS should be on the lookout for clients that might be in need of these, the caseworkers on DSHS's end are not always going to pick up on that. So having an advocate that can kind of explain those to a client and explain what to ask for, or to ask for those for a client, is really helpful. Or, if you have a really high needs client, designating an authorized representative. So that is somebody that is going to be able to contact DSHS on behalf of the client. As the authorized representative, you can receive the client's mail that so letters that are coming from DSHS in regard, like the award letters, changes in benefits, anything like that. Those letters would then also go to the authorized representative. The authorized representative is able to communicate with DSHS on behalf of the client. So they would be able to, complete interviews for the client, kind of those type of things. And it just kind of gives like another person that DSHS is able to kind of help the client stay on top of the letters that are, coming into them, or some kind of the bureaucratic stuff that can go along with working with a state or federal department. And then if something goes wrong, if the client is getting a letter that says, your benefits are being reduced because your income has increased, if they have received a denial letter and they feel like they shouldn't have been denied the benefit, or they were receiving benefits and somehow they're, terminated all of a sudden, requesting a hearing. You have 90 days to request a hearing for any of these reasons. And then 10 days to request the hearing to ask for continued benefits. And I don't know if Patty wants to jump in for a second and talk about continued benefits, or if you want me to talk about them.
I can if you'd like. So really the distinction is, if you get a letter in the mail that says, for example, your benefits are being terminated, that should take effect usually at the next month. However, if you think that is wrong and you're wanting to request this hearing, it's important to do it quickly within those 10 days. That 10-day window means that while you're going to court, figuring it out, working with an attorney, maybe coming up with a solution or providing documents, what have you, to resolve the issue, you are still getting your EBT money every single month to still be able to afford food. If you don't do it within that 10 days, you still can ask for a hearing for up to 3 months, those 90 days, you just might not get benefits. And there are exceptions to that 10 days. For example, we've had a client who their paperwork was lost in the mail for more than 10 days, so they didn't even know that this was happening for more than 10 days. Obviously, that is a relevant piece of information. It is impossible to assert your rights if you don't know that the issue has been brought up. So if there are extenuating circumstances, bring that up. They can make exceptions, but as a general rule, try and apply as quickly as possible if you want to retain this benefits while you're going through the hearing process.
And then, yeah, in order to request a hearing, you can call or write to DSHS or the Office of Administrative Hearings. So, and then client has a right to be represented in these hearings. You know, it's not like a criminal proceeding where, you know, attorney is going to be appointed. It's sort of on the onus is on the client at that point to find the representation for themselves. But they do have the right to representation in these hearings. And then phone numbers for, you know, both the customer service line and Office of Administrative Hearings is listed here.
And that would be where you can make a lovely referral to us, for example, or to Northwest Justice Project. We are two organizations that within King County provide that representation for hearings. And if the hearing date is scheduled before the client has the ability to do that, they can go to the hearing via telephone and request a continuance for the specific purpose of finding representation. That is a recognized reason for asking for that continuance. And as long as you're not doing it months on months on months, it should be approved, which should give you enough time to come speak to us or an equivalent of us.
And then, yeah, I sort of jumped the gun on this because I forgot this was a slide. So again, just the deadlines for requesting a hearing. You have the 90 days, and then continuing benefits, you have the 10 days to request. So,
and I mean, the one prong on here that we didn't already mention is if you have extenuating circumstances that you can't reach the 90 days, you also have exemptions as well. So those are good cause exemptions that give you up to a year. So for example, if you are hospitalized and unconscious, obviously you're not going to be able to fall within that short deadline. There are exceptions. If you think you might have one, reach out to us or reach out to DSHS if you're comfortable.
And then how to refer to our program. So generally you can direct a client or call on client behalf to our intake line. Our legal assistant, Janelle, is absolutely fabulous at managing and getting back to everybody in a very quick 24 business hour turnaround. And she's just absolutely wonderful in dealing with clients. Or you can generally just email the same email you would for the Ask a Lawyer, but just kind of let us know like, hey, I think I have a referral for you guys. Or if you have a specific question and just kind of want to pick our brain a little bit, we have contact information for Patricia and myself, our legal assistant, and then our staff attorney, Brittany Lowe. And then Will Ross is unfortunately no longer with us. Replacing him is a wonderful staff attorney by the name of Tanner Yamada. So you can reach out to any of us. We are more than happy to answer questions, or, you know, if it's a referral and we need to open up a case, we can do that as well.
And I will update that. That was my mistake. I will update that and resend it out to Tim. So when it's shared with you guys, it will have the correct contact information. But the general intake line and email are correct. what we have for you. Well, we're quick. April and I talk fast. So we have time. If anyone has questions, please feel free to ask on anything we presented on here today. Or if you just have questions about, should I be reaching out to you or is there somebody else to reach out to, ask. I think we can also turn off recording soon so that if you're not comfortable asking while on the recording, you can ask after that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation. I will echo Benjamin's sentiment in the chat. A lot of really good information covered. I really like that there are like specific mechanisms to basically like redress an issue with an application. There's not just like, I don't know, maybe I'll talk to like my caseworker. Like if you have a good relationship with your DSHS caseworker, that's awesome. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have just you want to try to circumvent that process. So knowing about, an appeal or like contacting the Office of Hearing Administration directly, like I love that. There are multiple ways to do this. Yeah, I want to give one more call for anyone who wants to speak to be captured in the recording, and then we will stop the recording. So yeah, anyone who wants to just speak or share in the chat, go for it.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Joe Richter with Sound Generations. If we have a client who they're receiving, like you mentioned, the minimum $23 for food assistance, and after we speak to them, we realize, oh, you have a bunch of deductions that you haven't called in. Do they need to totally reapply, or can they just call and say, hey, I have some deductions I want to claim?
You do not need to reapply. You can just call, update them, send in copies of those deductions. So for example, receipts or copy of the lease, things like that show those costs, send them on in. And as soon as they receive them, it should take effect and they should recalculate the amount of benefits they'll get from then on.
Awesome. Thank you.
DSHS also has what they call a change of circumstance form, which I will try to drop in the chat here. Sometimes this works for me, sometimes it doesn't. So if you're working with a client that, might be a little bit more high needs and just needs some assistance in, like knowing what to ask DSHS or knowing what to say to them, you can go through and fill out this change of circumstance form with the client and then just submit whatever documentation that client has with the change of circumstance form. And then, follow up on it. If you're submitting it by fax, follow up on it in a couple of days and just make sure that DSHS received, the form and the information and it's in the process of being, handled by them. I highly recommend if you are faxing anything into DSHS that you call 48 hours after you submit it, just to make sure that it has been received. They likely will not have it processed in that 48 hours, but it is not uncommon for DSHS to not receive fax for a number of reasons. So just making sure that they're receiving the documentation too is another good way of doing that. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's also quite a few deductions that, I feel like we wouldn't necessarily think of. For example, one of our most recent clients, we actually got to include all of the maintenance and service on their car because they were dependent on that car due to their disability for transportation. So things like that, where you have expenses tangentially related to your disability, those expenses can be considered and be deductions as well, or mobility aids, things like that you need due to your disability that you wouldn't necessarily automatically think of, like co-pays or prescriptions. So think outside the box. It's always worth trying. The worst they can say is no.
Awesome. Okay. I am going to call it. I'm going to say pause the recording so that anyone can share, you know,